Welcome to Chapter 2, Business Drivers for Access Control. So what are we going to learn today? Our learning objectives and key concepts are our learning objectives. Analyze how an information classification standard impacts IT infrastructure access control, requirements, and implementation. Some key concepts: business requirements for asset protection, classification of information, business drivers for access control, privacy and privacy laws. That's what we're going to be looking at. So, business requirements for asset protection. Let's start with that. It protects the business assets. Inventory, raw materials are kept in a secure to avoid theft and damage. We want to make sure we protect everything that we have. Assets are our data and equipment. Information assets must be kept secure to avoid compromise. This is why we keep them up in the, we have our firewalls on our systems and all that. So this is what we're trying to protect, all of our data. So why is it important for policies and senior management role? Policies are usually set at the upper level, as we discussed last week, at senior management. Organizations value intellectual property. They must control access to information to ensure survival. Protect confidential information involves technical reports, clear policies, and sound business processes that implement those policies. Access control policies are effected only with support of senior executives. And a great example, and it's simple, is Coca-Cola's secret formula. It's locked up in a safe. No one knows what it is, because that if someone did it, they'd be able to make the same thing, and there goes their competitive advantage. In the IT world, we have this too. Our programs, our data, applications, we want to make sure it's secure. So we make sure that we have a policy in place to make sure that what we have is protected. So some classification information. Information classification, the process of assigning information to different categories based on sensitivity. And sensitivity information, classifying sensitive information limits it's available outside of the organization. So not everyone can see every bit of data. This is why we have the different levels that we talked about last week, and we'll talk about going future. Accounting person doesn't have to see sales figures. Salespeople don't have to see accounting. And by putting in these classifications on who can see what, it helps us determine the level of sensitivity and how much we need to protect, how many logins or passwords or what groups have it. So everything should not be visible for everyone on our computer systems. And this is the purpose of having the classifications. So classification schemes is a method of organizing sensitive information to access levels. Only a person with the approved level is allowed to view that information, referred to as clearance. Every organization has its own method of clearance levels. As I talked about, it depends on where you are. Managers are going to have much more visibility than a frontline worker. Someone who just starts today is going to have very low visibility on information or very low clearance. They're only going to be seeing what they need to see. Where upper management, as you move up or you've been there a long time, you're trusted, you might have more clearance to see more sensitive data on how the company is running and all that. So need to know and least privilege. So basically, as we talked about setting up the different files, is need to know. Requester should not receive access just because of his or her clearance position or rank. The requester must establish a valid need to see information. Access should be granted only if information is vital to the requester's official duties. In a least privilege, a computer user or program should have only the access needed to carry out its job. And like I've been saying, it's not just so much you can't go up to IT and say, I need access to this. You need to have sign off. This is why we talked about policies and procedures last week. Well, that's a big part of it, by having who signs off on what, who gets to see what, when did I have it. And this is a big part of it. Same with the computer. Basic programming should be on every computer and only what they need. There's no extra permissions granted to make sure that whoever's sitting at that computer, that they only have access to the limited applications that they need. This helps prevent anyone from getting into systems or areas they don't need to see. So it's an important feature that we keep in mind. Now we'll look at the national security classification. This is set up by the U.S. government. The U.S. government classifies sensitive information into 4 categories based on degree of damage to national security if disclosed. The Freedom Act requires that federal government disclose records to citizens and organizations that request them. Classified information exempt from such request. So the basic areas that they have are unclassified. That's the one where the Freedom Information Act that anyone can see. We have confidential, secret, and top secret. So it depends on what we're going to be seeing and what we're going to be doing, on what level that we get classified. And, it's important that if something is classified as secret or top secret, only very few people can see it. Confidential, it's also limited. So now in the corporate world, where we are all working, or most of us are working, we have public. This is information that's released to the public freely. It might be your income statements or your annual reports. But this is what we want people to see. So we show this out there. It's out on our websites for anyone to see. Then we have internal data. Non-public information may be released without damaging the company. So this might be something about our benefits. We might have an extranet or an intranet where we have information about maybe holidays, where it doesn't really matter if they see it, but we usually don't want the people to see what we're looking at. So we're going to have internal data. Sensitive information that could cause serious damage to the company. So this could be trade secrets or something on this order that we want to make sure that we don't put out there. We want to make sure we keep it secure, just to make sure. It might be sensitive information about what we're doing. If you remember the hack of Sony a couple of years ago, they had a whole bunch of sensitive and highly sensitive information that was leaked, and it caused a big uproar. And highly sensitive is information that's extremely damaging to the company. And if you remember the Sony break-in, the hack by North Korea, they released movies, they released emails that shouldn't have been released. They released a lot of information that hurt Sony's reputation. So this is what we're trying to prevent. We don't want this to occur. So reasons for classification, well, as it says, damage to the organization if disclosed. Maintain a competitive advantage, as I mentioned, Coke. If everyone knew their formula, they would just make it and Coke would go out of business. Protect trade secrets, same thing, and protect national security. So these are all areas of why we want to make sure that we protect our data, protect what we want to protect, and we classify it. So even internal people can't see what's going on. So this is an important part that we need to do. So now we could have different levels of declassification. So automatic, maybe when something becomes a certain age, we can release it. So maybe after a certain time frame, 30, 40 years, sometimes the governments will release stuff. Systematic, maybe annual reports or something on that order where we want to just when it hits a certain age, certain stuff is released. Mandatory declassification review. This just allows us to review our process to make sure we're there. And does it fall under Freedom of Information Act? So these are some of the reasons why we're going to declassify our data to ensure that we meet what we need. Personal identifiable information. So this is something we all need to know. And basically, it's just information which can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity, such as their name, social security number, biometrics records, etc., alone, or when combined with other personal or identifying information which is linked to a linkable or to a specific individual, such as date and place of birth, mother's maiden name, etc. So this is what we want to make sure that we keep our personal identification not top secret, but we don't want it out there. We want to protect it. especially with our customers. And you hear this in the news every now and then, all these people that are going about, and they're breaking in and getting personal information. And then this causes problems. Also, a couple of years ago on Facebook, there were people asking about your mother's maiden name and asking questions. And so when you give out this information, we do need to protect it because these are used to help protect our passwords and all that. We'll talk more about that later. Privacy Act of 1974, collection, maintenance, and dissemination of the personal identification inside the federal government. Some other areas, the social security number, education, medical, criminal, and employment history may not be disclosed without consent. Some exceptions, U.S. Census, obviously, Bureaus of Labor Statistics, historical significant documents, law enforcement, congressional investigations, or other administrative purposes. There are exceptions, but basically they're not allowed to give out any information about us. Privacy Controls Catalog. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NISTA, Special Publication 800-53, Appendix J, Authority and Purpose. Authority to collect the personal information is the purpose of collection clearly stated. Accountability, audit, and risk management, implementation of privacy, governance, privacy requirements, and support structures. Data and quality integrity ensures quality integrity of the PII collected to maintain. Data minimization and retention. Retain only a minimum amount of information necessary to carry out stated purpose. Destroy data collected when it's no longer required. So just says we can collect it as long as we do it correctly, and then when we're done with it, we get rid of it. So that's a big part of what we're trying to maintain. Competitive use of information. Information about competitors or provide competitive advantage. Lure customers away, use contextual information to craft more competitive offers and bids. Vital to keep information secret, like formulas and recipes. These are just some of the things that we need to keep about. Valuation of information. Strategic importance, tactical importance, and impact on business. So as we collect data, we have to understand the value of it and what it means to our company. How is this going to affect us if someone gets all our customers and they take information or they can take them away? So it's important that we protect everything. Information has competitive advantage. So we have information. Competitive advantage allows firms to differentiate themselves from the competitors. So again, get the example of Coke. Their drink is different than Pepsi. And we want to keep it that way. If we had the formula, they'll have it. Security, paramount to business company success. So if we lost our data or our customers, we'd go out of business. And loss leads to decrease in market share and reduces profits. So these are the things on why we want to keep our information protected. Penalties for improper disclosure. Penalties for disclosing medical patient information and violating of the HIPAA Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. Here are our penalties. Unknowingness. So if someone comes up and we accidentally give them information, we can be fined $100 per record. If a reasonable cause to disclose, $1,000 for a record violation. Disclosure due to willful neglect in the situation, $10,000. Disclosure due to willful neglect that is not corrected is $50,000, means it keeps going on. And disclosure due to a criminal intent, up to $250,000 and $10,000 in jail, or 10 years in jail. I'm sorry. So these are the penalties if we violate the current HIPAA laws that protect the user's rights and individualities, that we can't allow our medical records to be pushed. So if we're in the medical field, we really have to pay attention, because even if you do it unknowingly, we could still be fined. Some business drivers why we want to look at access control: cost benefit, risk assessment, business facilitation, cost containment, operation efficiency, and IT risk management. All these play a big part in why we have access control. If we want to make sure that we have everything that we need, this is what we're going to look. So the cost benefits. The cost benefits analysis is basically a list of pros and cons to help the business make business decisions. Advantage gained from keeping the information secret, and risks avoided by controlling access to the information. Advantages gained. Is there advantage to securing information? Will competitors gain an advantage if they have access to this information? Is the information already secret? So these are some of the things we want to look at that could cause us if we lost our data. Some risk avoidance. Penalties for allowing sensitive information to disclose. We already talked about the fines and jail times that could happen if we violate HIPAA laws. And we can undercut by competition. If they know what our costs are, they can charge less. Every organization should know what information it processes and how important is that information in terms of access control. Risk assessment. First, we have to prioritize lists of threats and vulnerabilities. And we have to look at what we have, inventory of assets, including sensitive information. Business facilitation. Information is the backbone of many companies. Manufacturing, inventory and order numbers determine assembly line production. Finance, changing stock prices dictated by the buy and sell decisions. Controlling access to information is critical for facilitating the day-to-day operations of business. Operating systems implement access rights by giving users read, write, and execute privileges on the directories. So basic access levels, no access at all. They shouldn't be in there. They might be able to read something and not be able to edit it, or they have read-write access, and they're able to do a lot more with that level of access. So there's different levels that we can provide for each person. So the life cycle of an order. So here, our order creation, customer has a read-write access to generate what they want. After they place the order, the customer has only read access. Order processing has read-write. And customer service will have read-write in case they have to make any changes to it. Shipping. Customer has read-only access. Shipping has read-write access. And customer service, again, will have read-write access. And then once the order is closed, customer has read-only and customer service has read-only. There's no more reason to make any changes. If the product's been received, then as we go through it. So if you look at it, the customer only has read-write at the beginning. After that, they can only read what's going on. And each department is able to write and make edits and make changes to the order. And this is how most orders are done. Cost containment. What is the cost to a company if given a piece of information released to the public? There may be monetary fines for releasing the information, as we talked about with HIPAA. The cost to the company would be measured in terms of competitive advantage or lost productivity. Like I said, if you remember when Target was hit a couple of years ago, they lost reputation. People stopped buying from them for a while. It took them a couple of years to get back to where customers felt it was safe to go back and give credit card information. So these are some of the non-measurable things. So accidental dissemination of electronic information. So here we have the CIO who has 3 managers that he gives information to. An IT manager 1 should only give information to IT to development team 1. Team 2 and 3 should get that information from their management, not from management number 1. They should come from 2 and 3, their direct reports. So when disseminating information, this is not the correct way to do it. So operational efficiency, information. We can either have wrong information or we have too much information. Operational efficiency, right time, right people, right info. So that's what we're trying for. The right information, the right time, the right people. The right information must have access to the right information to do their job. And they need it. So when someone has the right information, they're able to perform their job, they can get into their applications, and they have the information that they need. The right people, productivity, can be impacted if the wrong people have access to the information or if too many people are brought into the decision-making process. The right time, the right person must receive the information at the right time or productivity and efficiency are impacted. So these are just some of the things that we got to keep in mind when we're granting rights to data. When do they have it? IT risk assessment. We have full asset inventory. What does our inventory consist of? Where is it? Vulnerability assessment. What's the likelihood of someone breaking in? Where can they get into our system? We want a threat assessment. We might use white hackers to get in and maybe evaluate our systems. If someone does get into our system, we need a mitigation plan in place to make sure we can keep it down to a certain so the exposure stays very small. Now we have risk assessment policies. What's the likelihood of someone trying to get our data? So the full asset contains a list with the location of every major resource within the organization. This is computers and software and hardware and servers and where they're located. The vulnerability assessment examines the weakness of the system. Threat assessment examines the potential of the weakness within the system to be exploited. Mitigation plans mitigate vulnerabilities of the risk. And risk assessment policies describe the company's policy governing how often a risk assessment should be conducted, methods used, who should be involved, and who would receive a copy of that report. Controlling access, protecting value. The importance of internal access control, salary and benefit information. Importance of external access control, trade secrets, business plans. We don't want to tell the competitors what we're planning to do because then they might start before us, then we would lose income. Implementation of access control with respect to contractors, vendors, and third parties. Contractors, conflict of interest, security safeguards, and equipment. Controlling access and protecting value. Vendors, clients, companies responsible to ensure vendors has access controls in place. Use contractual obligations to specify the need to safeguard. Other third parties, owners of property is responsible to ensure it's handled securely, conduct due diligence, and investigate third-party access control policies. If we're hiring a vendor, contractor, we want to make sure that they are going to follow our policies. We don't care. And so we're going to evaluate their policies to make sure they're at least as stringent as ours, and hopefully they're more stringent than what we're doing. So these are what we want to do when we're looking at third parties. So there's a case study in access control. First, Acme Insurance. Customer data is in an information store. Sharing data incorrectly could violate federal law and proprietary information. Slushi, multi-layer access control list. Failure, physical security breach resulted in exposure of trade secrets. So these are some of the things, having multi-layers helps protect the data. Only certain people can see it. That's what we're looking at. So summary, business requirements for access protection, classification of information, business drivers for access control, and privacy laws. This is what we're looking at. That's a summary of what we covered this week. I look forward to talking to you later.